Hello, good day. Welcome inside Red Mile Rundown episode 25. We are on the stretch drive of the NHL season. Pretty excited to chat here about what we've got going on around the Calgary Flames. I am one of the hosts, John Easthope, and alongside me, as always, my co-host, Robert Munich. How are you today, Robert?
I'm doing great. Coming off a big week in the NHL trade deadline. I absolutely love the trade deadline, and I got to work it for Daily Faceoff, which was super cool. So, yeah, man, things are going great. How about yourself?
Yeah, doing good. Enjoyed that trade deadline. It was like drinking water from a fire hose, and it was like having a really good day, except for the part of being at work while it was going on, but still enjoyed it a lot and really enjoyed now having an opportunity to react to all of the stuff we saw around the trade deadline. Before we jump into today's topics, wanted to thank the listeners and the viewers for their numbers, for the listens, the downloads, the shares, and all of the reviews. We very much appreciate it and continue to encourage those who haven't to please like, subscribe, share, and give us those 5-star ratings and reviews. You can follow the show across social media platforms as well. And let us know what you think of the show. Robert, the Flames didn't do much on the trade deadline, and by that did much, did nothing. They did their moves a few weeks ago with the Frost and Farabee trade. What do you think of Friday with the Flames standing pat, doing not much of anything other than watching other teams make moves? What do you make of Craig Conroy just standing pat there?
I mean, I didn't mind the idea of him not doing anything on Friday. The way I kind of view the trade deadline is I kind of look at it from a month prior. So like from February 7th to March 7th, what did the Calgary Flames do? And they made one deal, and it was the Farabee and Frost trade with the Philadelphia Flyers, which I think, looking back on it now, I think it's worked out well so far, and I think it's going to be a decent move for the future. But over the last month, for them not to sell off any pieces, for them not to weaponize their cap space, be a third-party broker, I thought was a little disappointing. So when you weigh the positives of the Farabee Frost trade along with kind of the negatives of not selling or not weaponizing cap space, I would say, it was a pretty average sort of trade deadline for the Calgary Flames. I'd give them, kind of a B or a B minus grade. There's, you saw some other deals where teams were that third party retention player. And I really wish, for the month leading up to the deadline, I really wish the Flames would have done something with that cap space. That was probably the most disappointing part of the deadline for me. So that's kind of how I viewed it. How about yourself? What did you think of the work of Craig Conroy, or the lack thereof?
I'm really glad Friday Craig decided to maybe lose his phone for the day, and not blow his brains out with a panic move one way or the other. But I'm with you there. Leading up to the deadline, I thought there were opportunities the Flames could have used that cap space as a third-party broker, say in that Rantanen type of deal where we saw Chicago get a draft pick just to swallow some cap up. Those kind of things. I understand why the Flames didn't do much. Craig said on Friday as well that those kind of deals just weren't out there for him to be part of. So he says, so we'll take him at face value, I guess. But the only making the one move I like, because he made it early. He made it early enough that you allowed Frost and Farabee to come in here. They got an extra 10 games under their belt with the Calgary Flames, a little bit more comfortable, and we started seeing fruits of that labor, whether it's Frost in the face-off circle and offensively, or whether you see Farabee finally coming around, scoring a couple of really nice goals over the last couple of games here, really starting to settle in. So overall, I'm with you there, Robert. About a B minus type of grade for Craig Conroy. You love the early move. I love he didn't do a ton on Friday to blow his brains out like we saw some general managers do, not to mention any names. At the same time as well, you just wish you have that cap space for the rest of the season just hanging out now, doing nothing with, which is a little disappointing. So, but what more would you have liked Craig Conroy to do besides use this cap space? Should they have bought in your minds, Robert? Bought anybody? Should they have sold anybody? Like, when you look at what this Flames team has in the way of UFAs, there wasn't a ton out there. But would you have liked Craig Conroy to maybe bring somebody else in to help supplement this group? We had the conversation. People have had the conversation where you need to reward your dressing room for having good seasons. I don't really think that way myself. But what do you make of Craig Conroy not buying or selling a guy here?
I'm okay with him not buying. I don't think it would have made sense for them to spend a fourth rounder to get a guy like Luke Cunnin. That's kind of the deal that I think that they would have been in the market for. In terms of selling, if you just look at the prices that some of these guys were going for, and you think to yourself, like, so like look at a guy like Brandon Carlo, went for a first round pick plus. I'd say Carlo's probably like a good number 4 on most teams. You know, decent second pair defenseman. You know, imagine like what you could have done with Rasmus Anderson. Say you put Rasmus Anderson on the trade block, and you told teams, "Hey, we'd be willing to eat half of his salary for the next 2 years." So these teams get a $2.75 million Rasmus Anderson for 2 playoff runs. I'm wondering, you know, what type of package could the Calgary Flames have got for something like that? That's something that I wish they would have explored more. By the sounds of it sounds like Craig Conroy wasn't even like necessarily willing to have conversations about it, which I find a little disappointing. Like, you know, what could have a Coleman trade look like? What could have a Kadri trade look like? What could have an Anderson deal look like? I wish they would have just been more willing and open to those conversations, because what if a team, you know, what if there's a team out there that would have given you a couple first round picks and a top prospect for $2.75 million Rasmus Anderson? You know, that's something I wish they would have done. Another thing too is I would have liked to have seen them just pretty much take what they could get for guys like Dan Vladar, Joel Hanley, Daniil Miramanov, Kevin Rooney, you know, maybe even a Braden Pahal. Whatever you could get for those players, I think you should have taken them, because a lot of them, you know, most of those guys are waiver pickups or they were part of a trade. You know, if you can get anything for Kevin Rooney, you got to take that. If you get anything from Miramanov, you got to take that. You know, I don't see Hanley as a large piece of the future for the Calgary Flames. If you could get anything for him, you should have taken it. And same goes with Vladar. So I would say overall, I would have liked to have seen them sell a little bit. And then in terms of buying, had they taken advantage of their cap space, say, you know, they retain half the salary of a certain player in a trade, or they had taken on a bad contract for a year and they received a draft pick for it, had they used maybe that draft pick to go out and acquire someone that could help for the next couple of years, I think I would have been okay with that. But that obviously didn't end up happening, and I am happy overall that they didn't end up buying and using their own draft capital. So that's kind of the way I see it.
I'm also glad they didn't buy. It didn't make sense to me to buy, and I mentioned that argument earlier of, well, you got to reward your room for the great season they have. I don't always buy that. Certain situations, absolutely, but I think in this situation, you saw this team performing good enough, I guess, to be in the playoff picture, and so I get for that reason not selling as well, where they're really signaled to me this trade deadline that the Flames are focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's getting that wild card 2 position in the Western Conference. They currently are the driver's seat for that position if things hold as they are today. And so this lack of buying or selling for me at the deadline really signaled Craig Conroy's belief in that room, and that he thinks that these guys deserve to be into the playoffs and to be in that chase to make the playoffs. Whether we agree with it or not, it's a different story, but I think that was Craig Conroy's mindset, and that he's going to revisit all these things in the offseason. He has to now. I also would have liked to see them explore, say, a Blake Coleman type of deal. The Miramanov one makes no sense to me why they didn't move him out, even if it was only on waivers. But those kind of things, obviously, they can wait till the offseason to do, but those are things at the trade deadline where you saw people overpay. I wonder what Blake Coleman could have gotten. You saw what Yanni Gord got for Seattle. You saw type of players like that move. Brent Fredrickson brought a first-round draft pick back. So these guys that are role players and depth players on your organization, and Coleman's got some term left on this deal. I wonder just what kind of packages you could get for those kind of guys. Not that I want them out of town, because I'm a big fan of Coleman, but those type of situations and those deals are things you have to try to take advantage of when you're trying to retool. Even if you're retooling on the fly, like Craig Conroy continually says he wants to do this on the fly, well, that's a good opportunity to also cash in on a good veteran that's not part of the long-term future. I don't see Blake Coleman being part of the long-term future. You mentioned Hanley, part of the long-term future of this team beyond a couple seasons from now. Take advantage of those situations, and if you just happen to fall yourself into this playoff spot, so be it, because it's not like it's actually a race for that thing. It's more of a turtle derby for that final playoff spot. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with coming down here. So overall, I'm okay with the trade deadline, what the Flames did or didn't do. But I also understand that as a fan, and if someone you would have liked to see maybe one of those longer term contracts moved out or one of those veterans moved out. A lot of people go to Rasmus Andersson moved out and just capitalize on the prices. But I'm really glad they didn't blow their brains out and spend those prices to bring a guy in just for a quote unquote stretch drive here. Anything else from trade deadline strike you there?
I'll just quickly jump in. I see a lot of people saying that, just revisit these trades in the summer. And I'm almost wondering, especially for Rasmus Andersson, like him in particular, I really wonder if the prices are going to be as high in the offseason as they could have been at the trade deadline, because you could have gotten 2 playoff runs out of Rasmus Andersson. That's why I, like, on social media and on flamesnation.ca, I was pretty adamant on them selling, because I actually do think the prices are going to go down this summer, because there's so many teams right now that are in an arms race to load up for the playoffs. And there were very few sellers that were actually out there, and there were very few sort of quality top 4 defensemen in Andersson's price range that were available at this deadline. That number and the number of available players this summer is going to increase, which means just through simple supply and demand that, because there's going to be more supply, the demand for Rasmus Andersson isn't going to be anywhere near as close as where it could have been at this trade deadline. So that's kind of why I was so adamant on it. I just saw a lot of people on social media saying like, oh, just do it in the summer, I'm like, well, I just think you could get more for him now. And, they got to take advantage of Rasmus Andersson while his reputation still is the way it is, because this season has been, I don't want to call it a disaster. It's been a bad year for Rasmus Andersson. Like, I was doing some research here before the show, and just looking at his stats since the calendar flip to 2025, like, it's been pretty crazy, the fall from grace for this guy. Like, in 2025, the Flames have played in 26 games. He has 5 points in those 26 games. And that's a 16-point pace over 82. He's a minus 15 in those 26 games. And the next closest Flame in terms of being a minus is Nazem Kadri at minus 5. There's a minus 10 gap between him and the second closest player to him. And that minus 15 rating is the 5th worst in the NHL since January 1st. So, and even you take a look at all of his underlying numbers are bad too. So Rasmus Andersson has this reputation, I believe, around the NHL that this guy is like a top pairing defenseman, right shot on a good contract. If teams really look closely at the season Andersson's having, it has not been good. So I think that's another thing too. They should have kind of taken advantage of that while Andersson's reputation was still high around the league, because I think it's probably going to start to take a little bit of a decline once people start to really analyze the year he's had so far. Before we move on, John, I want to quickly touch a little bit on the Frost and Farabee trade, because that is the significant move the Flames did around this year's deadline this season. So maybe just kind of revisiting it now that we've seen these guys play, 10, 15 games, however many games it's been. What have your thoughts been on the deal? Do you like it? Do you like sort of the future impact it could have on the team? Would you make it again if you were Craig Conroy?
Yeah, quickly here, 2 things. Firstly, on Rasmus Andersson, that conversation, we got to remember as well, your prices like to reset at the draft. The draft is when the market resets itself every year. So good point by you on the price and the cost of maybe getting a Rasmus Andersson trade. As for Frost and Farabee, I make that trade 11 out of 10 times every year. The Flames, you got to remember what the Flames gave up. They gave up a scorer they were not going to re-sign who was struggling. They gave up a player they had previously given up on by putting him on the waiver wire, and a draft pick, which is an unknown lottery ticket for down the road. They get back what has been their best man in the center ice face-off dot. Frost has been unreal in the dot. They brought back a guy who can potentially be a top 2 center on this team in Morgan Frost, a guy who can be a long-term fit. And they brought back a bit of a wild card in Farabee, who we've now seen over the last couple of games really found his footing beside Backlund and Coleman on a line, and they're really chugging along here. Scored an absolute beautiful goal against Philadelphia, his former team. And so for me, this trade, it was a home run at the time, and right now I love it, because I would do that trade every single time it's put on paper, because what you gave up compared to what you're getting is just mountains versus valleys here, because you've seen 2 guys come in here. It maybe took Farabee a few more games to get acclimatized to Calgary than it did Frost. But both these guys now seem to have found their footing. They're both guys you could put in specific roles, and they continue to improve every single game that I watch them. Just impressed with the work that Craig Conroy did there and that trade, and really impressed what we're seeing from both these guys, especially Farabee over the last couple of games here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes sense. Like you said, they didn't give up a whole heck of a lot for them, and we've seen sort of like bursts of greatness from these guys. I mean, you look at Frost. I think Frost has been really good, particularly on the power play. He's like he might be the only guy on the team right now that can make like a dangerous cross ice pass on the power play right now. He's really good on zone entries. I like his vision. Also, I just love the way he skates. Like I think he's just like such a beautiful skater. I know that's kind of like a small detail, but man, the guy is just a phenomenal skater. The way he uses his edges and kind of goes 10-2, like it's super fun to watch. And then with Farabee, I mean, yeah, the last 2 or 3 games here, we've started to really see what this guy is capable of, and it's super exciting because he's been great the last 3 games. That goes back to Carolina when he had 3 or 4 great scoring chances, and he scores that beauty in Dallas, and then he scores the only goal in a 1-0 win against Montreal. I like what they bring to the table, and they're both that 24, 25-year-old age range, so I think it makes sense. The only concern I have is just when you take a look at like the long-term cap for the Calgary Flames, like the salary cap, once Frost gets re-signed, my guess is he'll get re-signed. He'll probably end up making $4 to $5 million a year on a 4 to 6 year contract. That's kind of my guess from right now. So him and Farabee would then take up a combined about $10 million in cap space. And that's just adding a lot of cap space and a lot of money for more middle six players on this team. We talked about it before, but you just take a look throughout the roster between Backlund, Coleman, Huberdeau, Kadri, Sharangovich, now Frost, Farabee, and then you're going to have to re-sign Zary and Coronado. Like there's just a lot of kind of middle to top 6 forwards that make up a lot of money. So they also need to consider re-signing Dustin Wolf, and then if they want to re-sign Rasmus Anderson, all of a sudden their cap space is just gone, like the snap of a finger. So that's the only concern I have, is just the kind of the cap picture long term. But you'd hope that Craig Conroy and the analytics team would have taken that into consideration when they made the trade, and hopefully there's a plan in place to make sure they don't take up all their cap space just to sign the players on this team right now, because I think that'd be a mistake.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You got to make sure that you're very cognizant of that. Robert, why don't we skip ahead to that third topic here, and we'll go back to we'll circle back to Dustin Wolf. Let's talk about all those forwards here, because there is so many of them on this team that really make up your top 9. But we seem to have 10 players for 9 spots now that Farabee and Frost have both settled in here. We've seen great strides coming from other guys. Coronado, obviously, up on that top line. Zari's back. He's healthy. He's been playing tremendous. Wherever he's been put into the lineup, he's been down on the 4th line, up on the 1st line. Huberdeau and Kadri are what they are. Backlund and Coleman are what they are. But we seemingly have 10 players for 9 spots. So who for you is that odd man out? Because I go through this lineup, and every time I go through this lineup, I have a different guy to bump down to that 4th line. And sometimes they make sense, and sometimes they don't make sense to be on that 4th line. So, Robert, with all these forwards coming through the Flames here and being able to be doing different things for the Flames, do you have an ideal top 9, and who's your odd man out here?
The way I approached this was almost to do like a power ranking. So like you take those forwards and you do a bit of a power ranking, and you rank them 1 through 10 in terms of just overall effectiveness over the last month or so. So when I put mine together, it was pretty much Kadri and Huberdeau were 1, 2. And then spots 3 through 9 were pretty much all very similar. Like it was just all guys that were just kind of clumped together. I have a hard time putting one ahead of the other, but that group from 3 to 9, that includes guys like Coronado, Farabee, Backlund, Coleman, Frost, and Pospisil, as well as Connor Zary. The guy I have at number 10 and the odd man out right now is Yegor Sharangovich. And based off what I've seen from him in like the last like month or two, I have not liked his game at all. You take a look at his numbers, and they're fine. Like they're okay. Since the calendar flipped, he's got 6 goals and 7 assists. So 13 points in 25 games. It's a little over a 40-point pace. 6 goals in 25. It's close to a 20 goal pace. So, the numbers seem okay, but just the eye test, man, it's just off. There's something off with this guy. I find on most nights he makes little to no impact on the game. And when I think of Sharangovich and what he needs to do to be successful, for me, he's got to be dangerous with the puck. He's got to shoot the puck, and he's got to make a difference in the offensive zone.
Mm-hmm.
Be totally honest, I could care less what he does defensively. For me, that this guy is a goal scorer. He's a sniper, and that's what he's paid to do. And he's just not really doing it right now. Like when I watch his game, like he's not really that fast. He's not dangerous. He doesn't make any plays. He's barely getting that shot off. Like he's got an electric shot, and he was able to get that thing off a lot last season, and it led to a 30-goal season. Barely seen that this year.
Yeah.
So I've really, really disliked his game. I thought it made a lot of sense to healthy scratch him in that road trip. I believe it was the Carolina game. If I were the Flames and Ryan Huska, I would have him on the fourth line 100%. I think it's ludicrous that Connor Zary is there right now. And thinking of a line of like Zary, Frost, and Pospisil, I think is very exciting, and I think it makes a lot of sense to put guys like Zary and Frost together who are skilled, and then have like a grinder and a guy that can use his speed and Pospisil to kind of go get pucks for them. I think that makes a ton of sense. So I'm baffled by the decision to have Zary on the fourth line, to put Coronado down there, because him and Zary are kind of switching between the first and fourth line right now. The fact Sharangovich is getting as much ice time as he is, I think, is crazy, and I think it's something Huska has to change heading into the final few games here. So that's those are kind of my forward power rankings right now. Who do you think should be the odd man out?
I love that you power ranked him. I didn't think to do that. That was awesome. See, for me, Sharangovich was the guy that I put, if I had to put on the fourth line, makes no sense for me. For me, that's press box if he's down that low in the roster. You have other guys that play that fourth line role, and that press box is for Sharangovich. So I approached it where I ideally would like to see these guys slot together. And if you have 30-goal Sharangovich, and when he is going, he for me is a really good fit with that Huberdeau and Kadri on the top line, which would then make everyone else flow nicely throughout the lineup. You could have a Frost between a Zary and a Coronado as a line. You can have Cole, and this is where I might differ from a few people. You could have Pospisil or Backlund center that third line with Farabee and Coleman, and the other center your fourth line. You have the options there, but that is also relying on Sharangovich is going to be more than just a pylon skating around out there for the Flames. That's with Sharangovich going, scoring Sharangovich. If he's not scoring, then for me, he's the odd man out. And you put a guy like Martin Pospisil up in the lineup where he can be in a top 9 role and provide you more than what you're going to get from Sharangovich. So for me, he's the X factor in all of this top 9 talk for me. If he's going, you have the option of a Pospisil or a Backlund on your fourth line. If he's not going, then he's got to be either press boxing or bring somebody else in, because for me, he makes absolutely zero sense on a fourth line. With Rooney and Lomberg, he doesn't play that style of game. He would be swimming in his own end because he's not a really strong defensive player. You need him to score. You need him to get going. And so right now, this Sharangovich that we're getting, I'm going to do what Huska did the other night. I'm going to put him in the press box every other game because you're not providing me with anything. So I'm going to go with these guys who are. And we've seen strides from Farabee. We've seen strides from Pospisil. Heck, even Michael Backlund's been a little bit better since the Four Nations break. Blake Coleman's been a little bit better since the Four Nations break. These guys are coming in and going around. The only guy not going forward and progressing for me is Sharangovich. And yes, he did score at the end of that road trip, but it's just not enough, man. Like, if you're not scoring, what are you providing? And all the other guys provide something that Sharangovich is not.
So who would you bring into the lineup? Would just be as simple as putting a guy like Klapka on a fourth line?
If it's a fourth line role, then yeah, absolutely. Like, Klapka's been just fine in that role. I don't mind Dryden Hunt called up and put in that role. I'd call up a Sam Morton for all I care to put on that fourth line, because for the 10 minutes they get a night and the job that you ask them to do, those guys are fine in those roles. I just don't see Sharangovich not swimming in that type of role for myself.
Do you think that Sharangovich, like this upcoming contract here, do you think the Flames are kind of in trouble with it, or do you think that he can bounce back next season?
It's a great question because you saw it in New Jersey as well. You saw a really good season followed by a down season. He gets traded to Calgary. He has an up season and now followed down by a down season. So does that mean he rebounds and has an up season next year? Is that just how his career is going to go? One good, one bad, one good, one bad. So that's really hard for me to answer. I don't like the length of the contract based on what we're seeing from Sharangovich now. But at the same time, I'm also saying, listen, this guy is still young. We've seen it before from him. Maybe the injury is still lingering. Maybe there's something new wrong with Sharangovich. Not ready to give up on the guy from any means, but I'm also cautious of how long that contract is and the cost and the money that it's going to put on the cap for the Flames.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. I'm not going to give up on the player just yet. I think we got to give him next season to see who he is. Because like you said, he was great last year. This year he's been terrible. Let's see what he can do next year. And then we could kind of decide, okay, this is sort of the Yegor Sharangovich we're going to see with the Flames moving forward here. But with Sharangovich's contract, I think it's a kind of a warning sign or kind of a learning experience for Craig Conroy for like a middle 6'4" like Sharangovich. Don't sign him the year before he becomes a UFA. Like don't rush and don't sign him when he's coming off a career year because you just don't truly know who the player is, right? Mm-hmm. And I think a big reason why Conroy ended up signing Sharangovich to that extension was because Yegor said, I want to be part of this and I want to stay. Mm-hmm. And I think because of the scar tissue over the last few years left by, the Kachucks and the Gaudreaus of the world for leaving, I think Conroy viewed that and said, okay, that's really important to me. We got to get this guy signed, even though we're taking a big risk here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I really hope moving forward, Conroy kind of learns from that. Like, for example, say the year before Joel Farabee becomes a UFA, he has a breakout year and gets 60 points. Maybe don't sign him this summer before he becomes a UFA and just see if he can do it again before, really committing to a middle six winger like that. It's I'm cheering for Yegor Sharangovich. He seems like a great guy and seems like a really nice guy. It needs to start to come together, especially for a team that can't score. Like he's one of the guys they need to rely on to start scoring goals. Mm-hmm. Badly.
And you can always sign those guys in that free agency season, right? Anytime this season, they could have signed Sharangovich to a deal, and they could have saved themselves, say, $1 million, $1.5 million on the cap. Yes, the cap is going up, so it's not overly worrisome, but at the same time, you're taking your time. You're hey, great season. Show us a little bit more next season, and we'll give you the contract you're looking for. Or you go back to the guy, we're not seeing the same thing we saw last year, so we'll offer you a contract, but we're going to save ourselves some money here. There's no rush with these guys, and just because they're going to be a free agent doesn't mean you have to sign them right away. I don't understand that with some general managers. They did that with Jonathan Huberdeau, and for 2.5 years, we were ripping our hair out over this guy because he wasn't performing anywhere near his contract. Definitely a cautionary tale. I'm with you on that one. One guy I'm sure of we're not going to regret signing, and I know goalies are voodoo, but Dustin Wolf showed us again on Hockey Night in Canada versus an Original Six team in Montreal of why this guy is the goalie of the future and that this guy will be away from Montreal.
Yeah, I mean he was phenomenal in that game against the Canadiens, and I there's a lot of talk heading into that game about the Calder because he's playing against Lane Hudson, but I think that there needs to be a discussion about Dustin Wolf and the Hart Trophy. I think he's been that good. I think he's been that important to this team because, once again, the Hart Trophy is not who is the best player in the NHL. If that was the case, Dustin Wolf would not even be close to this conversation. The Hart Trophy is who is the player who is most valuable to their team. And in my opinion, you take Dustin Wolf off the Calgary Flames, I think they're in the lottery conversation. I think they're there with Chicago. I think they're there with San Jose. This team would be an unmitigated disaster without Dustin Wolf this season. Like Darren Haynes, he put out an outstanding tweet after the game on Saturday, and he showed who the teams were over the last 8 years who finished dead last in scoring and where they finished in the standings. And it dates all the way back to 2016-17. So it goes Colorado. They were dead last in scoring. They finished 30th in the NHL. Buffalo was last in scoring. They finished 31st. Anaheim 24th. Detroit 31st. Anaheim 30. Arizona 31st. Chicago 30th. Chicago 31st. And Calgary, who's dead last in scoring right now, 14th place in the NHL. That just says it all right there. It's insane. Like this guy has to be getting Hart Trophy conversation. Like those numbers right there back up what I was just saying, that they would be in the bottom of the league. And then In the Dome put out a great tweet. They said that the Flames are 32nd in total goals scored, 32nd in goals at all situations, 32nd in 5-on-5 goals, 32nd in goals per 60, 26 in 5-on-5 high danger chances, 24th in all situation high danger chances. No one's on pace for 60 points. No one's on pace for 30 goals. There's only 3 forwards on pace for 40 points. The Flames are in a playoff spot. Like, this is crazy. I cannot believe what this kid is doing. It's unbelievable.
Bananas.
Absolutely bananas. And like, people say, oh, it's because the Flames are really good defensively. Well, they're 22nd in the league at 5-on-5 in scoring chances against, 24th in shots against, and 20th in high danger chances against. So they're a below average defensive team. They're the worst offensive team, and they're in a playoff spot. How anyone can make an argument to say that Dustin Wolf shouldn't win the Calder or shouldn't be in a Hart Trophy conversation doesn't know what they're talking about and needs to seriously reconsider everything going on in their life right now if they don't think that opinion of Dustin Wolf. He's carrying this team, and like, I appreciate the fact that the Flames, they do work hard and they block shots. Like against Montreal, they were blocking everything. It was very impressive in terms of their commitment to winning these games the way they are. And they battle hard, but man, the reality of the situation is that Dustin Wolf is the only reason this team is in the mix. If it wasn't for him, this season would be a disaster. So shout out to Dustin Wolf. Give him all the credit in the world. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like... Actually, no, I shouldn't say that, because Mika Kiprusoff held this team up for a long time. But maybe not to this extent, because this is crazy.
That 1-0 win over Montreal on the weekend, for me, just summarized the entire season for the Flames. They couldn't score. They got out hit. They got outshot. They were atrocious in the face-off circle. They were beat soundly on the high dangers as well. I don't remember the number. I forgot to write that one down, but it wasn't close. And yet Dustin Wolf allowed nothing. He absolutely allowed nothing. And so the one goal that was an absolute beauty from Farabee to give the Flames the 1-0 lead holds up as the winner because of how good Dustin Wolf was. They went up against a rookie goaltender on the other end, and Dobish was tremendous for Montreal. And he gave Montreal all the opportunities in the world to stay in that hockey game. And the Flames were unable to produce anything to increase their lead. Even with the net empty, they couldn't do it. And Dustin Wolf stood in his head time and time and time again. And when you see things like the NHL putting out today on their Twitter that he's third in this metrics of rookies and third in their Calder, and it's all a bunch of horse crap, because this guy is literally dragging the Flames along. He did everything on Saturday in that game except score that goal himself for that Farabee got. He did everything. We marvel at this kid and what he does, and it's hard to put in context if you're not watching him every single day, what he's doing for this team. But even at league average goaltending numbers, the Flames sit at 30th in the league. Someone did the math that I was talking about last week on the thing, and I can't find the tweet now, but they sit 30th in the league if they get regular average NHL goaltending numbers. What Dustin Wolf is doing is single-handedly putting the Flames in the playoffs. And so I get that he should be part of the Hart conversation, because that's exactly what he's doing. He should be the favorite for the Calder because he's doing the hardest thing in this league, in the hardest position in the league to do it at. And the Flames team has not helped them out a great stretch. You had all those numbers there, Robert. Like, just 32nd in that, 32nd in that, 24th in this. Those are bottom third numbers, bottom of the league numbers. And this kid single-handedly putting the Flames where they are. And they should thank him for it, because without Dustin Wolf, they're not anywhere close to where they are right now. So shout out Dustin Wolf for sure. Anything else you want to praise Dustin Wolf on? Because I want to get into that playoff conversation that Dustin Wolf has put the Flames in and how close they actually are to being that wild card team here, Robert.
No, I mean, I'm just like thinking off the top of my head, like around the league, who should be truly in a Hart Trophy conversation? Like which team would fall off the most if they'd lost a single player to their team? And guys that kind of come to mind are like Hellebuck and McKinnon.
Yeah,
you know, those are probably the two top guys. I have Dustin Wolf right there. Like if the Jets don't have Hellebuck, I see them probably being more of a wild card team. If the Avalanche don't have Nathan McKinnon, they're probably more of a wild card, or maybe even on the outside looking in. And then with Wolf and Calgary, they go from being a wild card team to dead last in the NHL. So
yeah,
he's got to be in the mix for the Hart Trophy. So I might have to write an article about this, because someone's got to make the case for it here, because it's just, he deserves it, man. He deserves all the appreciation shout outs.
Absolutely agree with you 100% there. You speak of this wild card race, or Turtle Derby, as I'm going to call it, that the Flames are currently in the mix on. They are fighting with the Canucks, and if you are a believer, they are also fighting with the Blues and Utah for that final wild card position. They have the tiebreaker on Vancouver. They have the lead in points on other guys and games in hand on St. Louis. How do you handicap this race here, Robert, where the Flames sit, and how important that game is on Wednesday when the Canucks visit the Flames?
Yeah, it's clearly an important game, and the way I handicap it is I'd actually probably give, like, if I had to put money down, I would probably bet that St. Louis ends up getting that spot, because once again, I've been saying it all year. If you're last in the NHL in goals, at some point it's going to come back to catch up with you. And the Flames, they have a pretty difficult schedule between now and the end of the season. And if they continue to score at the rate that they do, they cannot make the playoffs unless Wolf just continues to get shutouts and let in one goal a game. And that's, and he's been that good. He's kind of been doing that all season, so maybe it can happen. But Vancouver, man, they're going through the exact same problem as Calgary right now in terms of goal scoring. Like, since the calendar flipped to 2025, the Canucks are dead last in the NHL in goals scored. They don't create any chances, but they're kind of similar to Calgary. Well, actually, they're a better defending team than Calgary is, but they don't have quite as good a goaltending. But they're kind of in the same boat where they're trying to win games 2-1 and 3-2, just like the Flames. And I take a look at teams like St. Louis and Utah, and I just see there's just quite a bit more higher end talent, especially among the forward group. Like, in St. Louis, you look at guys like Robert Thomas, who I think is one of the most underrated players in the NHL. Kairu's a very good offensive player, and you got guys like Holloway and Buchnevich and Braden Shen. Like, there's lots of good players there, lots more high end talent compared to Vancouver and Calgary right now. So I'm going to handicap that the Blues probably end up making it in that spot, but the Flames, they'll absolutely be in the mix. There's no doubt about that. I have a hard time seeing them completely falling out of it unless Wolf ends up getting hurt or goes through a skid. So my money's on St. Louis. Who do you think's going to end up in that spot as of right now?
Oh man, can I say none of them? Because really,
yeah, they might as well not be a playoff team, because they're going to get crushed in the first round.
Because you go through it, you can make a case for and against every single one of these teams. So if the Flames are in that wild card spot right now, they have the point in hand and tiebreaker versus Vancouver. They have the games at hand on St. Louis. So if they take care of their business and Dustin Wolf continues to play at this ungodly level that he's on right now, it's going to be the Flames. But at the same time, they can't score. They barely defend well. And a lot of their offensive numbers are just absolutely in the trash. And like we just mentioned, it's Dustin Wolf. Vancouver, they don't have Hughes, so how healthy is he going to be down the stretch? They're not getting the goal scoring from anywhere. Elias Pettersson is absolutely invisible, but at the same time, they have the most high-end talent of all these teams. If they get Hughes back, even Hughes at 80% is better than most of the defensemen in this league. If Pettersson can find any sort of scoring ability, that team it has more high-end skill. So you can see the path for them, especially if they beat the Flames this coming Wednesday. St. Louis, I like that you put them as your odds favorite. I might lean that way myself. but they don't have Parayko. They have games and everybody else, so it's a harder path for them, but it's a doable path. And then Utah, they flat out have really good young team, a good defensive team that's slowly starting to come together finally in that organization. And you can make the case for them as well. They have to make up a lot more points than the other teams here, but they're playing the right teams. They're playing teams around them down the stretch so they can make up those points. You can make the case for and against all four of these teams, and so it's hard for me to just say one team is better than the rest of them. I would love St. Louis in this position if they had played the same number of games as everybody else. But with the 2 more games played, it's harder for me to put them there. I think it's Calgary still. It might be a biased pick of mine a little bit, only because they have the inside lap right now. They have the goaltending. Goaltending can fix a lot of your problems. It's all Dustin Wolf's done all season long. And these other 3 teams aren't getting that level of goaltending as of right now. So I'm going to handicap it as the Flames, but I'm going to give St. Louis a ton of credit here because they're coming hot. And despite the loss of Parayko, that team is still well coached and they have the horses to do it. I love Robert Thomas just like you do. I think that guy is an absolute stud. And if he was playing in New York or Toronto, we would never hear the end of how good this kid is. So I'm right there with you there. So for me, it's a turtle derby. Someone's going to back their way into that spot. And whoever's going to get there are going to have a hard task ahead of them because waiting for them on the other side is Winnipeg or Vegas, depending how that stops at the top of the Western Conference here. How much do you buy Utah yourself there, Robert?
I think they're good, but I don't think they're quite ready to take that next step. I know that they're healthy and they're starting to play a little bit better. Like they're 6-3-1 in their last 10, but I still think they're kind of 1, maybe 2 years away from really kind of becoming that playoff team. The one thing they need to start winning at home. They're 12-13-6 on home ice this year, which is unacceptable. I mean, to win 12 games and lose 19 in a barn like that is not good. But the one guy there, I love Clayton Keller. I think that guy is a special hockey player. And
agreed.
You know, between Gunther and Cooley, like I mean, they got some really talented people there, but I just don't think that this is the year for them. I'm curious your perspective. Out of these 4 teams that are going for that last wildcard spot, who do you think is the best chance to do some damage or potentially scare a first round opponent this season?
Oh, that's good. Whenever I look at upsetting a team, it's who can have a goaltender that gets hot, and that for me, because he's been there and he's done it before, is Jordan Binnington. We saw it at the Four Nations. He let in the squeakers and he didn't like it. But when it came down, push came to shove, he stood up and he helped Team Canada win that medal. I think in the playoffs, he's been there. He's done it before. He knows what it takes. I think it would be St. Louis because they have the goaltender that can do it. And they have guys like Thomas and Kyrou that we mentioned that can also get hot and help win a series here for that team. So I would put St. Louis. What about yourself?
Yeah, you know what? Almost for the exact same reason, I would go Calgary, just because of Dustin Wolf.
Love it.
Because I mean, in a short playoff series, anything can happen. We all know that, and a good goalie can steal you at least one round. I don't know if a good goalie can steal you a Stanley Cup or take you to a Cup final, but you know, I could see a guy like Dustin Wolf. You know, say they do end up making the playoffs and they do get Winnipeg in the first round. You know, I could see Dustin Wolf stealing a couple games. And, you know, we know the track record of the Winnipeg Jets in the first round of the playoffs. It's not good, especially Connor Hellebuck. He's really never stepped up and played well in the playoffs, maybe outside that year they went to the West Final.
Yeah.
So, you know, I could see like a bit of a scare, maybe even a potential upset between a team like Calgary and Winnipeg because of that. Could Wolf completely outduel a guy like Hellebuck? I don't know. I think it'd be really fascinating to watch. And as someone that's, you know, a Flames fan and writes about the Flames and does social media about them, it would be great for them to make it and have those storylines. So I would say Wolf. If Quinn Hughes was 100% healthy, I might lean towards Vancouver because he's that good.
Yeah.
But he is so injured. He's got like 4 different injuries that he's dealing with right now. Like he's being held together by duct tape at the moment. So I'd probably lean towards Calgary in that regard, just because of Dustin Wolf, nothing else.
With a healthy Quinn Hughes, an Elias Pettersson doing just a little bit more than he's doing now, and a Thatcher Demko who's on his game, that would have been an easy decision for me to make it Vancouver. But I have no faith in Vancouver. I have no faith in anybody else on that roster to do anything other than Quinn Hughes. You can't even, like, the goal scorer Besser that everyone was talking about the trade deadline going for a first rounder. You can't believe in that guy to score consistently for you. Jake DeBrusk isn't an offensive leader. He's a nice secondary piece for you. You've got okay defensive defensemen on that roster, but you just don't have anyone to pull that wagon along. And I don't believe in Kevin Lankinen. As good a season as he's had, I just don't believe in him over the course of a longer playoff series. So I'm with you there. I like Dustin Wolf pick, but I still think it's St. Louis based on what they have there. But it's going to be an interesting race down the stretch here to that wild card spot. Anything else you want to add here on the show, Robert? If not, where can the folks find you on social media? What's coming up on flamesnation.ca from you?
No, this is a great episode. Lots of good stuff to talk about. Yeah, just find me at Ring of Fire CGY on Twitter and read some of my articles at flamesnation.ca and follow Flames Nation as well as our podcast page. We'd greatly appreciate it.
This podcast loves Dustin Wolf. If you haven't realized that today, the Flames have only 2 games this week, but 2 important games. Vancouver comes through for a big division showdown that also has huge ramifications in the wild card. And how do they stack up against the new look Avalanche? We'll see that as well this week. Enjoy the games. Thank you so much for making this part of your podcast rotation. Do not forget to like and subscribe. Follow Robert at Ring of Fire CGY and follow myself at Vintage Johnny 84. We'll see you next week here on the show. Enjoy the games.